Good points smart people use. Be in reality about relationships.
So there's a good test about looking at reality. The one thing you need to look at is the relationships you thought you're in and what they really are. There are people who are having a friendship and it's not really a friendship. There was a woman who had a friend who was a counselor, and it turned out in the long run that the woman just was waiting till her life straightened out, and then she no longer was of service to her, so she didn't keep the friendship. There's another example of a man who thought they had lifetime friendships. One of them did, and then when he left the religion, he disowned him and wouldn't talk to him again. And so his friendship was not really the depth he thought it was. It was not really the companionship part that they thought they had, because it had a religion or a god, a false god, divide them up. And so that's a really good example of look at your relationships and see how they really are. There are aged parents that treat their grown children certain ways, and that's not really a friendship, that's family. And so you might want to just re-examine all your friendships.
Good points smart people use. Watch your emotional investments the size of the stake.
So this is a good point. So don't be invested in the outcome because it leads to disappointment. So one of the noble wins, basically, when you try and break down what they're trying to say in the Buddhist belief system, is that expectations are one of the ways to limiting or getting rid of expectations is a way to get feelings of happiness back. And so you might want to really look at what you expect to happen. Now, there are smart people, they would sit there and they would say, okay, here's a good point. You can kind of judge where the direction is by the random facts you're given, and you can see kind of a normal direction for it. That's not the same as having emotional investment in the outcome. That's calculating the outcome. And so that is a good thing. But you don't want to just say, okay, this is the outcome I want, and I'm going to be disappointed if I'm not going to get it. It leads to overreaction, underreaction. It leads to problems and unhappiness because you never feel fulfilled. You never feel like it was a good thing. So watch how much emotions you invest in the outcome. It doesn't mean you can't have expectations. It's funny, because health-wise, there's no difference between stress and expectations. If you can turn your stress into something positive, your expectations, it's healthy for you. And if you keep it as stress, it's unhealthy for you. So it's a good point. Watch how much you have invested in the outcome. So that being said, I would also say that it's also called the size of the stake, and I've done videos about that idea. That concept is that you want to look at how much you have invested emotionally in any negotiation, in anything, and so you want to not have so much invested in it that you can't lose it. And that's a really good concept for business and for your life is watch your expectations and then also maybe be careful that you don't overinvest in it. Watch the size of the stake when talking to people or negotiating. So that's a really good point.
Be careful to watch the important stuff. Good points smart people use. You cannot control others, and you are the key to your own change.
Now I talk about in other videos about controlling things and towards the future, and you need to get rid of the idea you can change people or actions or emotions. I read a thing about happily married, and they said if your spouse never changed, can you still be happy? And that's if you know that your marriage will last longer. And that's a really good question because you are continuously changing. So is your spouse. But it's going to change in ways that you want it to. And so you need to get rid of the idea that you can control your spouse. It causes a burden, emotional burden, causes bullying, causes all sorts of emotional problems between you in a relationship. But it's a really good point that you can't control people at work. You can't treat it. So years ago, and this was before the onslaught of firings, I was a manager, and I told a person who was talking about leaving, I said, well, I want you to go. This is not a job where I want you to spend the rest of your life. I want you to succeed. And that's why I taught you this, and I taught you that, and I taught you this. And when my boss's boss got mad at that and said, why are you suggesting that she should leave? And I said, no, she will leave. She will leave because she's capable, and I want her to have a job that fits where she's at right now in her life. So I'm giving her all this information. So you really need to just take people's actions and emotions as they come and how they help you. Thank you. I'd say a really good choice, a really good point is don't feel hopeless. You are the key to change. One of the noble winds of Buddha's belief is that everything changes. And it's a pretty good philosophy to have, and it's a really good parent. You find out, well, if I have such and such, I'm going to be happy, and then you get that object and you're not happy. And it's because you can also lose that, and it causes a lot of unhappiness for people. So you are the key to change. How you wisely use that key, how wisely use that idea, and how much you can guide that change is within your control. And
Smart people use. Sex can be spiritual.
So I was doing research about the philosophies of Kama Sutra, and there's 3 different philosophies, and I was reading about it and doing research about it. And one of the things that struck me, and I think that all religious people should realize, is that sex can be spiritual. And it can be spiritually and enlightening and helping you to advance as a human. I believe that sex, ethical non-monogamy, I'm not promoting unethical non-monogamy, but sex can help you to, okay, in a swinging situation, you take 2 people that don't really know each other, who communicate, come together, have a great time, and it is a wonderful thing. It's something you remember forever. It's just a wonderful factor. And then you have to deal with certain emotional things to be able to do that successfully. So the motivation is to have a wonderful experience. The work that's involved is dealing with your jealousy and your emotions and all the normal things that you are, and your negative emotions and your positive ones. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is allow yourself those emotionals. Allow yourself to be positive in the negative emotions. Allow yourself the understanding that there have been times in which my emotions have just backslapped me, slapped me right in the back of the head because I didn't expect them and they were there. So look for those too. But also think of sex as a spiritual thing. And it's interesting that that's why a lot of churches want to control your sex. If you have God in your sex, you have the wrong God. If your church says they can control your sex, you have the wrong church. You have a deceitful church. If you have anybody else, if your neighbors, if your political views want to control your sex, you have the wrong thing for advancement as a human. You have the wrong thing for happiness. You control your sex. You are a single being who controls it. And so, and don't give that power to anyone else. You really need to keep that as part of your personal power.
Personal growth is hard but worth it. Good points smart people use.
Okay, so there's a very fine line between what stresses you out and what's excitement. Now, physically, excitement is good for you. It causes chemical changes that are good, and generally speaking, stress is bad for you. It causes chemical changes that are bad. So generally speaking, you need to watch what scares you, what stresses you, what excitement you have, enjoyment you have, for good and bad in your health. Now, there was a doctor who was pointing out that the physicians today are prescribing medicine. They're not actually prescribing lifestyle change. So a good point here is try and turn your stress into excitement if you can. Try and look forward to the stress. That might help. The other thing too is that there's a very fine line between the two. But one's healthy, one's not. And it's a good point that you need to watch your stress. A lot of the medicines and health problems today are caused by stress. So the doctor was saying, it's nutrition. It's why do they prescribe certain medicines instead of something like magnesium or calcium or vitamin C? Why aren't they prescribing something that would not hurt your body? And they give all these chemicals, these prescriptions. Well, because of money, we know that. But they should be prescribing the natural things first. And one of the things is exercise and stress. So it's something that you can do to help yourself. It's a really good point. Help yourself. Try and figure out what you can end in the future as far as your stress level or your exercise level. It's really helpful to you.
If self-control was easy, it wouldn't be considered a virtue. Good points smart people use. Error rates.
Okay, now I've said this, and I've been quoted by other people, but I've said this before. You can only control what you think, how you feel, what you do. Those are the only things within your control. So trying to control others is really harmful when the only things you can control are within yourself. Don't worry about what other people do or say, because the only thing you can control is yourself. Leave room for mistakes in both you, yourself, and others. Now, some people are very hard on themselves. They treat themselves as if they should be perfect, and they strive towards no mistakes. Mistakes happen. The Bible talks about random things like time and unforeseen occurrence in Ecclesiastes. It's basically a really old idea that time and random chance are going to control reality, that you can't. And don't worry about mistakes, and don't worry about other people's mistakes. Now, some people are very easy about forgiving their own mistakes, but not others. The other thing I would say to that is in business, error rates is what they call it. But a brain surgeon spending 6 hours to do 1 hour worth of surgery will go over things 6 and 7 times. And they have staff standing around counting sponges and watching the instruments, and they still have an error rate between 1.5% and 3%. So it's like, wow, a brain surgeon has an error rate. So now, not all those errors lead to a problem, but the point is that you should be okay with other people's error rates, and they should be okay with your error rates. Now, a way to deal with that is called the next philosophy, where somebody brings up an error. You can control it. You can make a note. You can change what the error is. If the error is sitting there in your face, you can change it. But the next philosophy is you don't put any emotions to it. You say, okay, next. I won't do it again. Or, okay, next. In that circumstances, I'll call for help. That's how you control error rates and seeing errors in yourself and other people. Give yourself the same break you give other people. Say, I made a mistake. It's like I do 10,000 things right and I made one mistake. Who cares? It's not a personality flaw. Now, there are people who don't care about mistakes, and that's really wrong too. You should actually care enough, especially in your work and your life, to try and not make the same error twice. There was a man who said, his managers came to him and said, we notice you don't not make mistakes, but when you make them, you don't make them again. And so that should be kind of your adage, that you don't want to make the same mistake twice, but you don't want to have so many emotions that it bothers you.